Hi, I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge. Welcome to another edition of Half Hour on the Hill, my ActonTV cable show. Very honored today to have Leela Ramachandran, a volunteer with LUCE. So Leela, we know each other very well through Acton circles, but thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you so much for all your amazing work for LUCE. You really are one of, I'd say, the most active volunteers in the state on this. I think some people now are familiar with LUCE, the general public, but if you could describe what LUCE is, and including starting, what does LUCE stand for? Because I always hear some people say LUCE, some people say LUCE, other things. So what LUCE is the correct pronunciation? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, you can call it whatever you want as long as you get involved and call the hotline. LUCE stands for Liberation, Unity, Community, and then Esperanza, or hope, in a number of languages. Mm-hmm. And LUCE is really a coalition or a network of immigrant-led base-building organizations across the state. They've been doing this work for a while, prior to Trump kind of 2.0.
So it started before Trump 2.0.
The organizations have existed.
Okay,
this kind of
sure.
network and community kind of came together at the very end of last year, and then certainly after the inauguration this year. We actually didn't launch the hotline until like March of this year. Mm-hmm. And so there are a number of organizations that are base building orgs that kind of form the steering committee of LUCE. Mm-hmm. And then we have over 1,000 volunteers all across the state, and kind of organize into geographic hubs. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we've been kind of fielding the statewide hotline that folks can call if they think that they see ICE, if they need support after someone's been detained, if they need other resources related to something that's happened around immigration enforcement. And I think LUCE was initially envisioned as kind of a rapid response type of deal, and certainly that has continued, and it has become a lot of other additional work like mutual aid and community education, and have kind of become a one-stop shop for a lot of folks, which I appreciate, and it's certainly a lot of work to kind of keep together at all times.
Absolutely, absolutely, and so it's obviously engaged in observing ICE as if they're targeting a particular neighborhood or city or town, or actually arresting and detaining immigrants. That's part of it, but also people can call this hotline. What sort of things could they call and report about?
Yeah, I think it's most helpful if you have a little bit more information. Then there's kind of a black car in Acton. But anything around, like, I see a car parked at the corner of the street in this street, and, it has really tinted windows, and maybe here's a license plate. You can call in when you kind of see specific things happening. You can call in when people are actively detaining someone, if that's what you're witnessing, unfortunately. And we have folks who are trained to show up and verify whether it is ICE or not. Part of the problem is we're all on high alert in this moment. Yeah. And so sometimes, there's a guy picking his friend up from the train station, his windows are a little tinted. And that doesn't necessarily need to initiate a community response that suggests that ICE is in town, but totally understand that folks are on kind of high alert. And so we are happy to show up, and we have shown up, and verify whether it is ICE or not. And if it is ICE, we kind of have different protocols around, like, letting folks know that ICE is in the area, and trying to make sure that folks have the information available to them to make informed decisions about how they're moving through their life.
Sure. And when there is either a call made or LUCE volunteers are on site and seeing someone who's getting detained, what is the sort of that rapid response to support that individual and his or her family? Yeah,
great question. Primarily when we are on site and ICE is there, we don't intervene, and that is kind of core to the work that we're doing. And we know that some of the ways that ICE has been moving is kind of in secrecy and in private areas of courts and behind police stations. And so we know that it is a tactic to try to move in secrecy, and we want to document and bear witness to what is happening so folks aren't just disappeared off of our streets and our communities. And so we will be recording. We do our best to try to figure out who the person is that's getting detained. Our kind of primary goal after detention is to make sure that folks around are doing okay. It can be really traumatic to watch an ICE arrest because of the force and the nature of the way that they're engaged in our communities. And then kind of secondarily, also, we want to make sure that if we can connect that person and their family to legal support kind of as quickly as possible, because ICE has been moving folks out of state so quickly. And so trying to make sure that folks can file a habeas petition as soon as possible.
And in terms of that legal support, which is so critical, are the immigration lawyers, the resources adequate now in Massachusetts, or does need to be more resources, more immigration lawyers stepping up?
I think we always need more immigration attorneys. You know, we have some relationships with some really great ones and some other great programs. So Bijan has been great in trying to kind of triage and get folks support. The legislature, thank you, passed some money to support folks in paying for immigration attorneys. And the volume of need is just so great that I think there's always a need for more attorneys. And also, there are just so many people who can't afford attorneys. These folks, by and large, are not rolling in the big bucks. They're just trying to make a living for their families and kind of doing that. But getting taken off the streets without any heads up is really just destabilizing for family systems and communities as a whole. And so, yeah, certainly more attorneys, more resources to support it. And I think we need more like activists and folks out there kind of getting involved in responding and supporting families.
And I'm glad you raised that volunteer question. Is how does someone, is there an email to contact or website for someone who wants to volunteer and get trained to be part of LUCE?
So the LUCE website is lucemass.org, lucemass.org. And on the main page, there are two kind of options to volunteer. One is kind of around ICE Watch and doing the verifying of ICE presence. But you can also choose that if you want to help in doing mutual aid efforts, trying to raise money for families, trying to support them with rides and other things. And then the other option is to volunteer on the hotline. So we have the hotline staffed from very early in the morning to like 9 p.m. at night in a number of languages, including but not limited to English, Spanish, Portuguese, Creole. And so folks can also volunteer to be on the hotline. And you can do that from your house.
And on the immigration lawyer front, and appreciate you mentioned the funding. It was $5 million in the state budget to hire lawyers. Is that I think a good chunk of that money passed through MIRA and then was providing grants to immigration lawyers. So I know in my district, attorney out of Southborough, Antonio Massa, he is getting a grant to hire an additional immigration lawyer just to focus on detentions. So
I just met him the other day.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yep. Very good friend of mine. And really has stepped up because obviously, to your point, many of those who are getting detained or targeted are less well off and often can't afford to pay an attorney. So.
And there are so many people who are using this moment to capitalize for themselves. And so they're offering support. People are desperate and taking immigration advice and contracting them for a fee. And the folks are not delivering, or they're delivering really shoddy work that really is not a good representation of this family's case. And so that has also been tricky to navigate and support families through. They might have tossed their entire family savings into an attorney that doesn't actually even file anything for them. So
absolutely. And that's why I will say, not that I'm an expert on this, but I certainly say to my constituents, which, for me, particularly in Marlborough and Hudson, with a particularly large percentage of Brazilian and Latino Americans, is, feel free to call my office, and happy to connect with immigration attorneys, as well as obviously LUCE and other trusted networks. So.
Yeah, and I'm also pretty active in Marlborough, Hudson, Framingham, Milford, all communities that have been hit really hard. And so certainly we're familiar with the terrain, what's been happening, and also attorneys who are willing to support. So happy to continue partnering, and also folks are welcome to reach out to us. Yeah.
And I think I saw, I don't know if it's the Globe or another Massachusetts publication this morning, saying that the massive spike in arrests of immigrants since September. So you're really seeing more federal agents, the implications of President Trump's mass deportation agenda really ramp up, including in Massachusetts.
Yeah, and I think one of the most disgusting parts that we've been seeing are the places that they've been targeting. I think in particular, folks who are just trying to go to their normal scheduled check-ins at either Burlington or ISAP offices. ISAP is a private company contracted by DHS to do kind of surveillance of immigrants. So they'll install ankle monitors, they'll install apps on people's phones simply for being undocumented. And And so at their check-ins, they come, they think they're just doing a check-in and they're detained. And also going to district court, often for like violations related to driving. And so you might be driving without a license and all of a sudden you're in ICE custody. And, you know, we hear kind of this narrative around folks doing it the right way. And these people are trying their best, right? Like we're working with a family now who has not a single ticket, has been going to all the check-ins on time, doing everything he needs to, and he's still being threatened with deportation despite federal orders from a judge. And so, yeah, I think that's been really hard to see. And most recently, outside of the Faneuil Hall
oh my goodness,
citizenship issue. So,
no, I it's been particularly chilling that what happened at Faneuil Hall were those, you know, from countries that perhaps are now on the newly expanded list of the ban by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, you know, being told they couldn't go into Faneuil Hall to be sworn in as citizens, people that have done everything, quote unquote, the right way.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you think about this moment and folks think that they finally arrived at this moment when they are finally maybe safe to not be pursued by federal deportation officers, and then to have that ripped away from them feels remarkably tough. And I think from a LUCE perspective, we don't engage in kind of a good immigrant versus a bad immigrant narrative. Even if folks have been criminalized or policed in the past, we still believe that you deserve due process. And I think it's incredibly frustrating when folks have gotten to this point and then it is ripped away from them over politics that don't even make sense. So yeah, it's been really, really tough and frustrating for so many families.
Yeah, I've made the point after I posted that story, I think GBH News first reported it about Faneuil Hall, is that, you know, these are, you know, Afghan refugee families that were partnering with U.S. military servicemen and women in Afghanistan, no doubt already a level of vetting, you know, during that time in the country. And then when they fled Afghanistan, another level of vetting. There are now, I think, approximately 200 Afghan refugee families in the Senate district I represent, supported by these neighborhood support teams. You know, young people, you know, going to college, getting jobs, giving back in so many different ways, incredibly peaceful and law-abiding. And just because of, you know, the actions of one person in Washington, D.C., everybody gets targeted, which is disgusting, and xenophobia and racism all tied into one. So
and we know that hypocrisy has never been a problem in this country, but I think it's remarkable that a number of school shootings have occurred and we've never painted that brush for all folks who look like them, because we know that that doesn't make sense.
Right.
Yet in this instance, we are using it to make really punitive immigration policy kind of on the fly, which feels really counter to everything America purports to stand for.
Absolutely. We're going to take a little break, and we'll get back to talking to you more about your work with LUCE. This is State Senator Jamie Eldridge, half hour on the Hill, and we'll be back in a moment.
So as a technical sergeant, E6.
I served in Vietnam in 1969.
I am an U.S. Army veteran.
Have you ever helped a fellow veteran?
Of course.
Yes.
Try to always be there for each other.
I do my best reaching out to my brothers and sisters in arms.
Have you ever asked for help yourself?
It's always tough, right?
I can't say that I have. I mean,
If you don't have someone to kind of help you guide those thoughts, it can be really bad.
eventually, you know, you just can't deal with it on your own.
I guess it's a part of the military too, right? Service before self.
It was drilled in, service before self.
And you start to question, maybe people would be better off without me, you know? When you realize that you're not alone, once you take that first step, there's so much support.
Hi, State Senator Jamie Eldridge here for the second half of Half Hour on the Hill. I'm talking to Leela Ramachandran, a volunteer with LUCE. And Leela, thank you so much for walking us through, you know, what LUCE does, you know, the volunteer work that you're doing. I know you well enough to know that this is quite stressful and can really take a toll. How, I mean, if I may ask, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And how do you keep, keep doing this, given the sort of foot of the federal government being on the backs of so many immigrants?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I have been repeatedly frustrated that it feels like average citizens are needing to step into these roles that are high risk, that are stressful, that are hard, because it feels like not enough folks with kind of traditional forms of power are doing enough to like protect folks. In terms of how I'm staying afloat, I don't know that I always am. I think, number one, it has been a privilege to get to know so many of the families. I wish that I had gotten to know them outside of like their deepest moments of crisis.
Yeah.
But I've learned so much from folks. They're remarkably kind and generous. And so the interpersonal relationships that I've built have felt sustaining. I think also it's really been heartwarming to see how many folks are, for the first time in their lives, even as kind of retired folks, stepping into this like volunteer activist, if you want to call it, role, because what they're seeing on the streets like is not okay with them. And so I think it's also been so great to see people who are retired or who are actively teachers or people who are currently students, and like a whole host of people come in and say, you know, we collectively don't agree with what's happening and we have a commitment to our neighbors. I think watching that and seeing the leadership of new folks coming in has also felt sustaining. And I think through all of this, kind of a North Star of believing deeply that our people deserve better than this, and that what is happening is cruel and unjust and certainly not keeping us safe. And so I think being in community with so many people who are like-minded and who are committed to each other has felt really helpful. That being said, there are certainly days I am crying from morning to evening based on what I'm hearing from folks. There have certainly been moments, you know, every time I witness a detention, I cry afterwards. I don't think it's ever going to become easier. And I think in particular about a case in Acton in which two dads were taken. They actually were brothers. And I ended up walking into their apartment after they were taken because they had both communicated very clearly. They were pleading, saying, I have kids in Spanish, but and so when I walked into their apartment, there was a 10-year-old with a bunch of little kids. The dads were about to walk back into the house and were not able to.
Yeah.
And the 10-year-old was the only one tall enough to see out of the windows to watch his dad and his uncle being taken. And I just remember the 10-year-old kind of falling into my arms and like collapsing. You could see all the strength just like fall out of him. And I think that moment in particular cemented for me kind of a disruption of this narrative, though I knew it, that it's not what's happening is not keeping us safer. It's certain they don't have any regard for children left behind. It was very clear in that moment. It shouldn't be upon us to stumble across an ICE arrest and then need to go be babysitters for a few hours. I'm happy to do it because kids deserve safety. But I think all of that has underscored just how violent and abhorrent these actions are. And so to this point about well-being, you know, I keep those kids in my mind and I feel like, you know, I certainly could be targeted by ICE. I have been threatened with arrest by them for doing things that are permissible. And I think I have a responsibility as someone who was born here and is a citizen to be standing up and doing things that others might not be able to but might want to do. So.
Absolutely. And so that keeps you going. But it is so emotionally, you know, fraught, and yet so valuable to step up and volunteer. And I know you volunteer in lots of different capacities, but that volunteering really does create, you know, friendships and partnerships, and realizing the good work that you're doing that is helping people. As I said before, you know, with the full force of the federal government being against immigrants, particularly undocumented immigrants. Do you feel that, you know, your work or LUCE's work is having an impact to move more Americans to say, well, wait a second, this isn't, even if they did vote for President Trump, that this isn't what I voted for, or spurring them into action to get involved in some way, whether it's with LUCE or volunteering at a food pantry or something? Like, are you seeing people move who are kind of in the middle and not as focused on this as many more active people are?
I hope so. I
Yeah.
think it's hard from my vantage point to say whether it has moved folks or not. I think
Yeah.
the two things that I'll say here are, number one, that if folks have voted for Trump or like thought that they were in support of immigration policies that are actively harming our people and are seeing it now, like there is a space for them in LUCE and there is work that you can do. We're not going to cast you out just because you at one moment thought that they were doing something that you thought was protecting our country. And number two, I think that I really hope that folks are moving. I think it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we are upending kind of narratives that have been socialized around safety, around security, around who deserves to be American, because what is happening right now does not actually comply with the things that are being said. And so I think in this moment of kind of a rise of authoritarianism and censorship, it feels really important to continue sharing narratives of what is actually happening on the ground. And so that includes family separation, that includes workplace raids. If you're going after people who are kind of freeloaders, like that's not where you're going to find them. And also folks who are citizens and they know they are citizens and they're taking them anyway because they fit a profile.
Exactly. Yep.
And so I think continuing to disrupt some of these things, but also that we can keep our tent wide enough for folks to come and join us when they do realize that what's happening is not okay.
And I will say, as a state senator, for 12 communities, 185,000 people, I will say, sadly, I haven't seen, a lot of people at least open up to me that they've moved or they've been, troubled. When I posted about the, legal permanent residents who were denied entry into the Faneuil Hall last week, maybe one or two said, "Oh, this is unacceptable. This goes too far." But most, continue the narrative that somehow, I think what particularly disturbs me is that, sort of that all immigrants, not just undocumented immigrants, but that in many ways all immigrants somehow are just getting supported with taxpayer funds, that they're not working, that they're somehow just dependent on welfare, when it's exactly the opposite, and statistics prove that out. And yet that narrative, to what you said, that's been socialized is that, oh, illegal immigrants, live in, government or subsidized housing and get SNAP, when actually that's, not only against the law, but more often than not are working much harder than your typical American and don't rely on any, government support.
Yeah, it's been really disappointing. And I think it is a testament to how, our like social media companies and our algorithms are doing what they're best positioned to do, which is to make money. And it does feel really disappointing that we don't all realize that there are real problems in our country. And I understand a bit of the perspective of like, why are you supporting immigrants when there are unhoused folks in our streets and have been? And yet, I think the disconnect here is, for me, I'm also concerned about unhoused folks here who are not immigrants. But my analysis is that there are billionaires who are kind of our common denominator, who are making money off of undocumented folks wage theft, and also unhoused people, and charging a ton for healthcare, for example. And so
why
I think
are people angry about that? Yeah.
I think it's where our analysis comes in, that we have a disconnect. And so, I think I would love to engage in more of those conversations. I don't often find spaces in which folks are willing and open to having the conversations in a constructive way. But I think it needs to happen, and I think that's where like leaning into our relationships that we have with our family, our friends, our coworkers, where we know that we might not totally be aligned, but at least we have a relationship that can kind of be a container for the conversations in a way that I can't just jump into your comment section on Facebook and no one's going to listen. And so, I think encouraging folks to really lean into their relationships in their life rather than cutting folks off. At some point you have to take care of yourself, and can you stretch a little to see if you can pull someone a little bit further to kind of understand how these systems and structures are oppressing all of us kind of at the same time.
Absolutely. In terms of, we're approaching the end of the year, is LUCE, you're continuing to have more volunteers do more work. Any other sort of action items that you see LUCE being more involved in for next year, or continuing to do the work that it's doing? Or
I think they're certainly continuing the work. I think it's never done. We have so many families who we engaged with this year and are going to continue through the next year because they're still in these kind of really tough, risky legal proceedings at any chance they might get detained. That being said, I think we need to better engage more people. People don't necessarily have to be doing ICE Watch to be part of LUCE, but I'm not sure we've made that super clear. And so I think my hope is that we can more clearly explain to folks that there are places for everyone. If you speak other languages, if you like to fundraise, if you have some like paralegal experience and don't want to do immigration work, but might want to help families fill out kind of family preparedness documents. All of that is helpful, and all of that is kind of part of the work that we do. I'm just not sure we've spelled it out entirely. And I think also going into the next year, I think there might be a responsibility to think about how our work connects to authoritarianism, because so much of this is interconnected. And so, yeah, I'm really excited. I think it's been pretty incredible to see what LUCE has been able to build since like March of this year. I really would not have expected a statewide hotline in a way that we've never really seen in Massachusetts. Much of our work is often, as I'm sure you know, focused in Boston or Western Mass or maybe Central Mass. So it's been pretty incredible, and I'm really excited to see what we can build together. But certainly we're going to need more people and more capacity to keep protecting our neighbors.
Absolutely. And I appreciate laying out the different ways that people can get involved if they don't want to do, ICE Watch. So thank you so much for your work. I try as much as I can to thank you personally for your work, but really I cannot express my gratitude enough for all your amazing work you're doing for so many of my constituents and so many people across Massachusetts. So I appreciate you stepping up with LUCE.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie.
Thanks for coming on the show. And thank you for those watching Half Hour on the Hill. I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge with Leela Ramachandran with LUCE. Thanks for watching.